Hey guys, Nishan asked an interesting question. He asked me for my thoughts on sparring. Loads of stuff that I could say about that, but I want to keep these videos not too long. And I've also already written about sparring a little bit on my blog over the years, so I'll see if I can find some links and put that in the description if you're interested. Overall, I would say that when you look at sparring, I mostly look at it in the context of combat sports and not necessarily self-defense training, because if it's self-defense training, the whole idea of making it sparring seems counterproductive to me. You're not supposed to spar when you're in a self-defense situation. You're supposed to be trying to end that situation or get away from it, which is the opposite of sparring. I think that things like scenario training and certain drills can be much more interesting for self-defense as opposed to sparring. So I'll mostly be talking about combat sports now. The way I teach MMA and the way I have been teaching combat sports for a long time is have this structure, and that is a hierarchy of training concepts, a pyramid, if you will, that determines what is the base and what is the most important part. So the base of the pyramid is physical conditioning, physical traits, and assets like strength, endurance, and so on. Then you have the technical level on top of that. On top of that, you have strategy and tactics, and the final capstone is the psychological and mental aspects. Sparring should incorporate all of them. Now you can emphasize certain of these different levels depending on what you want to do and what that student or fighter needs to learn at that point in time. But the goal is that they acquire skills on all these levels. If you don't do that, then I think you're doing your students or your fighters a disservice, because let's look at the main, horrible way that you see sparring, and that's the guys who fight these wars in the gym, and they do pretty much the intensity of an actual fight in the gym all the time. You're gonna shorten your career. You're gonna get up injured and banged up by the time you get to the fight, and in the long term, brain damage and so on is an issue. If you don't think that's real, it's fine. You don't have to. Look up the documentary or the interview with Gary Goodrich, who would fight, hardcore. He got knocked out a fair number of times, and the interview I saw with him was years ago already, and he's just like, I can meet you at a party and talk to you, for a while, and then the day after, I won't recognize you, I won't know. So that's his life now. There's much more information now available when it comes to brain damage from getting hit in the face. We used to think that it was the cumulative effect of getting hit in the head, but now we know that every single punch that rattles your brain is a bad thing, and there's no exception. Every single one of them is one too many. There's no way to avoid that when you compete. You shouldn't look it up in sparring every single time you spar. That is completely counterproductive, because there's no such thing. And one student, he once asked, he thought that, just like when you take, you learn to take shots to the body and you get stronger because of it, then you learn to manage the pain and not succumb right away, that if you take punches to the head, that your brain gets stronger. And I thought, no, it's the opposite. You get weaker. You see this typically when you see guys, take a bad knockout, and from that point on, the chin is just gone. They just can't take a punch anymore. Yeah, because the brain's messed up. So how should you spar then? Well, the goal is to have, as much as possible, all the levels that I mentioned be there. Depending on where you are and what your goals are, you're going to emphasize a few of them, I think. For instance, the physical aspect. You have somebody new to the gym and they're training in MMA or kickboxing or Muay Thai, whatever. You teach them basics and this and that, and then at one point they're going to have to start working with a partner. What I have my guys do is that, okay, now first time they quote unquote spar, I tell them, like, look, nobody gets to hit you. You get to do offense only. You don't have to defend anything. Just punch and kick us as much as you like. Do whatever you like. And then they immediately figure out that it's much harder than shadow boxing, hitting the pads, working on the heavy bag where it's a stationary target. And now all of a sudden it's much more complicated. And they figure out it's very quickly that it's very tiring to always attack, which is one of the main lessons I want to teach them, is that if you go all out for 5 minutes straight, you're going to be exhausted by the time you get to do the next round, unless you have specific conditioning, unless you train for it. And even if you have excellent conditioning, it's still not a great idea to waste all your energy in the first round. So you learn pacing. You learn to think of managing your energy and your endurance and so on, as opposed to just wasting it away in the first 3 to 4 minutes. That is one aspect. Immediately at the same time, the beginner learns that the technical expertise that they built up, the technical skill they built up by doing shadow boxing and pad work and so on, doesn't automatically 100% transfer to sparring, because there's more variables. And you have to figure out how to adapt from one part of training towards sparring. And then you have the strategic and tactical level that comes later, when they are getting used to the physical requirements of sparring, and then they also figure out how to fine-tune the technique so they actually land against somebody who's defending against them. And then it's making some good decisions. Okay, what do? Do I punch or do I kick? Do I do a left or a right punch or a left or a right kick? Do I do a combination? I'm going to double jab cross first, or do I double jab right leg kick? Whatever. The idea is that it's no longer about being able to do it correctly and knowing how to do a technique correctly, but knowing why and when you do certain techniques and what you do for which reason. And that is something you practice then in sparring as well. Gradually, students discover that, and then they work on that more and more and more. It becomes a problem they have to fix. Like, how do I beat this guy? And you know that you have the physical qualities to do so. You know that your technique is good enough, but now it's just a matter of figuring out the puzzle that he is presenting you with. Like, how do I beat this guy? The final level of sparring, and this is where it gets to intensity often, is especially for then the beginner, they start trying to think more in strategic level, and then all of a sudden, if they fight somebody who's good or they spar somebody who's good, they find that even if I'm trying to do the right thing and I'm making good decisions, that's not a guarantee. And then all of a sudden, at that level, maybe the sparring is a little bit more intense. They get punished for making mistakes or making the wrong choice. And overcoming that punishment, let's say that you throw a sloppy jab and you're just way too heavy on the lead foot and you don't step out of range enough, and your sparring partner just leg kicks you every single time you do it. There's a consequence now. There's pain to pay with for the mistake that you make. And that is something that is a psychological aspect you have to learn to manage. Understanding that you're going to get hit. It's going to suck and you're going to have to fight through it. And there are levels to every single thing that I mentioned on these different aspects of that training hierarchy. There's levels of how difficult you can make it during sparring with the psychological aspect, for instance. There's things you can do in sparring where you try to take away the favorite weapons that your sparring partner has and force them to be uncomfortable, to be out of their comfort zone. That is psychologically difficult. At first, many people, excuse me, when they spar, they're not able to do that. And this is when I teach my guys. That I've got a young student now. He's a teenager. He's been doing karate for a while. And I'm teaching him and telling him, you need to learn to fight close by, because you like long range, you're fast, you got long legs and arms, you zip in and out, it's all great. It's not always going to work. You have to figure out how to fight at close range, which means that when we train, you have to consciously decide to get close to your partner and do the body hooks and the clinch work and so on. So and a while ago when we sparred, I deliberately took away long range from him, and I always moved in and made sure that even if he did hit me, it allowed me to get close to him. And he found that it was costing him a lot more energy to stay away from me, and it didn't always work. That the technical things he needed were different. That the strategy and tactics had to change immediately because long range was no longer available to him. And psychologically, it was very difficult for him to just stay focused and do what needs to be done because you get this panicked feeling a little bit. And this is an example of how I think sparring should be, is that it should be helping you get better at all these different aspects of that hierarchy of training. You don't have to do it that way. You can just spar for fun. Obviously, that's fine. But as a coach, as a teacher, I would say that if you're just sparring and you're not learning anything, okay, it's fun. But then you can also do other stuff that is fun. I think even when you don't spar all that hard, there's always going to be a risk involved. So you don't want to take it lightly. You don't want to just do stupid stuff and then end up injured just by accident. I mean, we've all had it. Then you're sparring, and even if you're not going hard, is that you make a mistake and the guy just kicks you in the face, and because you were goofing off or you weren't as focused and you didn't think it was going to be a high kick and it was, or you have a day off, and you make mistakes and he doesn't. All that stuff happens when you spar. So there's absolutely no reason why you should take sparring lightly. Meaning you should have fun, but you should be there doing your best not to get hurt, not to get hit in the face. Because as I said, every single hit that you get, current research says that it's why you need to avoid every single impact to the head. Are you going to die from that every single one impact? Well, it actually can happen, but it's pretty rare. But you don't want to get into the habit of eating punches with your head, and thinking that that's good training. So sparring should, in the best of circumstances, always be something constructive. The intensity, that can go up depending on the needs of the individual person. If you're preparing for a competition, you better learn to do intensive sparring. But typically, what I always say, and what we do, and what many professional fighters do as well, is that to the body there's pretty hard contact, but not to the head. They just hold back a little bit the power to the head. Why? Because if you're half knocked out when you get to the competition, I mean, first you might take a light jab and be out and lying on the ground. So you want to avoid that. All right, Nishan, I hope this is a good answer to your question. Keep the questions coming, guys. I'll see if I can answer them. Take care. Bye-bye.